This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview. On today's programme, we're going to hear from the Borders clubs that are playing tomorrow and hear what the coaches have to say about their matches in the Premiership, National and East Leagues. Dale Clancy is here, and we start with our featured match in the Premiership playoff semi-final. It's Hawick against Mar, first against fourth, and whether or not you like playoffs for the Premiership, it's happening, so we just have to get on with it, and those rules have given Mar, who finished the league 29 points behind Hawick after 18 games, a real chance to retain their Scottish title. The other semi-final playoff tomorrow is second-placed Curry versus third-placed Edinburghs at Millennium Park, a repeat of last season's semi, but Hawick and Mar at Mansfield Park. That will be our featured match, of course, tomorrow, and let's hear first of all from Hawick head coach Matty Douglas.
Doesn't get much bigger than this now, Premiership playoff semis, and to be back-to-back Premiership playoffs in terms of last season, making it and now into this season, massive credit to the players and to everybody that's involved, especially Lewis and Graham, the other coaches. They've put a massive amount of work in to ensure that the backs and the forwards are doing their part, and then we can bring it together as a team. And again, to go 18 games unbeaten is people don't realise how hard that is, and especially in the Premiership when you're going to some tough places, like Millennium. Going there, hadn't won there in 15 years, managed to win. We went to Mar and won where we struggled last year. So, even Hawks on Saturday, we struggled there last season. So, in terms of that, I can't be any prouder of what the players have achieved. But the way the league is at the minute, we need to now go and win a Premiership. And look, if we can do that, then we will be known as a top-class side. And that's the kind of message we've got to the players. We've put a lot of hard work in this season. It's now time to really perform when we need to. And look, Mar are a top quality side, Premiership champions for a reason. I think they've done a fantastic job to make the playoffs after a bit of a sticky spell mid-season. So credit to Craig, and I've got a lot of respect for him. But in terms of our performance, that's where we need to match them. And look, they're a light pack. They'll get around the park, and that's where they're strong, moving ball edge to edge. And if we can, bring our defensive game, which we should, we've got the best defence in the league for a reason, and we can match that and just stick to our game management and game plans and just really come alive in that opposition half. And if we have the crowd behind us, I think we should expect a big performance. We're at the stage now where when we play the top teams in the league, we really knuckle down. So look, it's a massive occasion, a lot of pressure flying around, and we need to match that now. We need to deal with the pressure. And look, it's I think the big point for me is that it's a home semi this year. And we struggled away last season, but look, we have the home advantage, and we know how tough we make Mansfield Park for teams to come and win. So look, it'll be a huge battle. It's one that we're excited for, and that's been the message this week. Let's get excited for it. We might never be in this position again, so let's enjoy it. But let's put a performance in that we can be proud of. So, team news, a lot of tough selections this week. A few players miss out, and big thing for me is that it's not been 15 players that have got us here. It's been a squad effort, for the first right through to the fourth. So, team is 1 Sean Muir, 2 Fraser Rennick, 3 Nicky Little, 4 Dalton Redpath, 5 Connor Sutherland, 6 Stuart Graham, 7 Callum Rennick, 8 Jay Linton, 9 Hector Patterson, 10 Kyle Brunton, 11 Ronan McKean, 12 Ethan Riley, 13 Andrew Mitchell, 14 Charlie Welsh and 15 Kirk Ford, 16 Matt Carrier, 17 Rudy McLeod, 18 Ross Graham, 19 Sean Fairbairn, 20 Gareth Welsh, 21 Grant Huggin and 22 Lewis Ferguson. So strong squad on paper. It's now up to us to perform and enjoy it.
That's Matty Douglas. All season he's been ticking off targets and succeeded in all of them. This is the next challenge.
Yeah, definitely. We've spoke about it week on week in terms of the league structure and what the teams know they need to do. And Hawick, firstly, to go through a Premiership season unbeaten is phenomenal. Especially after coming so close last year, they've done really well to improve their squad. They've got that depth, and it's a great milestone for them. Now is when it's knockout rugby. It's completely different rugby for that team. They need to rise to the occasion, because Mar, as you've alluded to beforehand, Mar will know that this is a great opportunity for them to upset the odds and snatch the Premiership crown. So it's a huge game this weekend in the Premiership.
They've done it once, they can do it again.
Exactly, they came for second position last year, beat Hawick in the semi-final in a game that we covered, and they went on to beat Curry in what was an exceptional final. So, you've got to look at the form both teams, or all teams in the top four have been in. Hawick have been head and shoulders above the other three. They are, really strong favourites going into this. However, it doesn't matter. On paper, if you're favourites, you still need to perform. You need to go out there. Matty Douglas is, he's led the team really well this year, I think, with some difficult decisions he's had to make. And he's certainly got a strong 15 there. He's got a really strong starting squad. And you look at players like Charlie Welsh, that's came out, made his debut against Jed Forrest and is now nailed down a starting position. So, they've got competition for places in there as well. They've got players coming through and they start the game favourites, but it's going to be a huge battle against Mar.
And he's not afraid, is he, to make these tough decisions? As you say, Welsh in for Lewis Ferguson, that will raise a few eyebrows, but, I guess he's picking on form.
Ferguson's been really impressive, this season and scored a lot of tries in the Prem. So, he's obviously picking on form. There's the return of Carrier to the bench as well, which is a difficult decision that Matty Douglas has had to deal with throughout the season. The club captain not starting, not being in the squad some weeks, but obviously now when you're needing leaders in that squad, he's back in there. And obviously there's difficulties in that position because you look at the Fraser Rennick's a standout hooker. Ross Graham's been in there as well. You've got the likes of Callum Rennick that can play there. They've got a lot of depth, but it's a big squad that they've got there. 22 players. They've returned Jay Linton at 8. Over the last few weeks after being away, and moved Stuart Graham to 6. They can reshuffle it. Daniel Sudden, they've lost him to injury, but they've got the replacement straight in there. The squad that they've got is actually ridiculous for amateur rugby. And hopefully they go on and get that win at the weekend. But Mar, it's going to be huge.
And you have to pay tribute to Matty Douglas. He's 24, 25 years old and finishing the Premiership in his second season with Hawick right at the top there. Tremendous.
Yeah, I like the way that Matty speaks. I like the way that he leads the team. He's got a kind of clear vision as to the way he wants to play rugby. He's obviously got a lot of rugby intelligence, which, for a young guy who finished playing quite early, it's great to see that he's always had that mind. And being a standoff, he's been able to, in his early years, in his early career, when he was obviously a really promising player, he's got that rugby knowledge. And he's then trying to instill that to people who, some of them are, around about ages with him as well. So, he's passing on that kind of information that he's got, his direction, his vision for the club. But we spoke to Nicky a few weeks ago, Nicky Walker, and they've been in conversation as well. So he wants to get knowledge of other people as well and learn and kind of hone in his own craft.
And I think he's learnt a lot from George Graham, hasn't he? And he's admitted that. That's
the beauty of it. He's learnt a lot off of a really experienced forward coach who had a great time at Hawick. He helped kind of bring Hawick and Gala and experience that he's had in the Borders. It'd be silly not to use that kind of resource and learn off him. Matty being a back, there's obviously different traits that they have. So, he's certainly, made a good account of himself this season. He's put Hawick in a really strong position. And if you think now, it's been 21 years since Hawick were able to win the Premiership. They also won the BT Cup in the same year. Matty Douglas leading the team. There's a possibility that they could do the double again. And I'm gutted to be missing out on it this weekend and not be there at Mansfield Park, but I can just imagine it's going to be a really, really good occasion because Mar are going to bring down spectators, Hawick are going to flood to Mansfield Park, and we'll be hoping for a Greens win.
Robin Purdy and Graham Dodds will be our commentary team for that one. It's going to be a really interesting match, of course. In the other semi, Bill Paulson's going to Curry against Edinburgh Accies. I think he loves Millennium Park. And, of course, Hawick put 40 points on both of them.
The thing, as we said before, about that you've got to look at form, you've got to, you pretty much have to pick a favourite, and Hawick have been head and shoulders above everybody else. But that's an Edinburgh derby. We've seen before in the league that, Heriots have beaten Edinburgh Accies, so they can beat each other on their day. It's knockout rugby now, so it's going to be an interesting tie there. Curry, they were home finalists last year against Mar. They got beat, and what was a cracking final as well. So, it's not out with the realms of possibility that the Edinburgh Accies could, again, steal that win. We could be in a position which you would love, Stuart, if it was third versus fourth in the final.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started. I had my rant last week, and I still stand by it, of course, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, then replay last week's edition. But it is Curry against Embrackis, and of course, Curry Embrackis last season as well, when it was first against fourth. Embrackis were leading Curry, I think, with very little time to go. So as you say, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, and it only needs a red card in the first, say, 6 minutes to change a match.
Yeah, and that's sport, that's rugby, and then sometimes, that's the kind of luck that you get in these sort of games, and yeah, you look at it, and Hawick have been stand out, and if we talk about the league structure as such, but Hawick have been stand out, but sometimes that's, the moment in time that you've got to deal with that dictates a game. And, in 20, 30 years from now, when they're in the club rooms and they're speaking about what could have been or what happened, they're the stories that they're going to be regurgitating. But let's hope from a Greens point of view that there's no bad luck this weekend, and I can't believe I've just said that. That might be the curse, but I'm sure they've got the personnel on the squad to deal with any sort of things that are going to happen this weekend.
Well, it's a couple of cracking matches anyway, there's no question about that. But no playoffs in the national leagues, thank God. And let's look at National 1, starting with Kelso, who visit Watsonians at Mireside. Hugh Brown will be covering this one for us. We hear first of all from Kelso Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan.
Tough trip to Mireside on Saturday to play Watsonians. We had a win over them at home, but it was one that was really tricky. It was one we won 31-15, but it was a tricky match, and Watsonians were quite impressive that day, and they play a good brand of rugby, quite similar to Melrose. Got a good rolling maul and in their backside to go wide at every opportunity, so we know it's going to be a tricky one. Every week it is for us, and it's no different this week. We've got to get on the road and get the win if we want to keep progressing towards where we want to be. And yeah, it was a bruising encounter last week against Melrose, very tight match. So boys are certainly in a good place regarding momentum and things like that. Couple of changes to the starting lineup. Charlie Marshall and Alan Frame drop out in the front row and are replaced by Ewan Knox and Terry Logan. Both the other two take their place on the bench. Fergus Cubbin drops off the bench and is replaced by Aaron Lunn. Apart from that, there is no changes to the squad, so fairly settled. And yeah, we've got to just get into our groove pretty quickly up there, try and get the job done, along with a lot of accuracy and work-ons from last week, because although it was a great win last week, there was loads of things we could work on from it. And yeah, this week we'll try and improve on that again, and if we do improve on that again, we'll hopefully have enough to get a result, but it certainly won't be an easy one.
Neil Hinnigan, Director of Rugby at Kelso, and interesting changing the props around from last week.
I think that those two players in particular, probably Charlie Marshall specifically, gave a lot in that game Saturday past. I thought there was a couple of loose handling errors that he had. That, it might be a performance issue. It certainly wasn't for his engine and his endeavour, because his work rate on the pitch was phenomenal. He was always offering himself up to carry, and Alan Frame as well. He's had a really good season. He looks like he's still got a spring in his step. But they've got good personnel to come off in terms of replacing them with Knox and Logan, because they're players that could equally start as well. So it's a good problem for Kelso to have. They've got two players coming off the bench that can, they don't impair the starting lineup. The good thing that I can see in there is the likes of Aaron Lunn getting a run out, a guy that used to play for Duns. He took a bit of time out of rugby because of his career, and I know him from his time as an apprentice at Borders College, and he was a player that when he moved to Kelso, eventually got to the club, and he's been nurtured well, and he's finding his opportunities in the first team. He's a player that potentially could have stepped away from rugby and now is on the cusp of potentially playing Premiership rugby next year. So that just highlights the good work that Kelso are doing just now, but it also illustrates the strength and depth that they have.
And a really good match last week, 18-15. It really went down to the wire, as we expected to do. So it was 2 points, I think, that Melrose won at the Green Yards, and 3 points at Pointer Park. Two teams who really have given a lot in this division this year.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting game. It was really quick starting. Melrose came out of the blocks. It looked like it was going to be one of those games where it was, Melrose would look to try and chuck everything at it, and Kelso would remain composed. It did for a while. Melrose went down the tunnel in the lead. In the second half, I do feel that there was probably some sloppiness from Melrose that did let Kelso get on top of them, and then once they were on top of them, they showed their power up front. They suffocated Melrose with the ball, really. But there was a lot of times when Kelso were kicking downfield and using the wind that Melrose were doing some uncharacteristic errors. They were kind of playing into Kelso's hands, and towards the end of that game, they played into Kelso's hands, and Kelso showed the qualities of a team that have learnt. Once they got their fingers burnt against Gala, they've learnt not to do it again, and they controlled the game towards the end. And I think, in the balance of play, they were worthy victors, but there was certainly a lot of opportunities left out in the field for both teams.
Because it was interesting, the first 11 minutes, Melrose got their 2 tries. They didn't score tries after that. In fact, there was no scoring for 55 minutes in the middle, and then 10 minutes at the end, it was really, really tight. But it could have ended up a cricket score, but obviously both teams were making sure that their defensive work was up to speed.
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting game in the fact that you allude to the period of time where there was no score. But from a kind of rugby point of view, watching that, it was really interesting to see, how each team was trying to kind of test and probe each other. They were looking for the opportunities to get on top. They were just not given anything, and I feel it was that little change in tide when Kelso kicked a little bit more, and then there was the errors that allowed Kelso back in. So, it was like a kind of boxing match. They were jabbing each other for about 55 minutes until Kelso eventually did, they hit that knockout blow. They got that try. There was the interesting finale to the game with the 2 penalties as well, the 2 quick-fire penalties that Melrose drew at level, and then Kelso went up the other end and got the penalty to win. So, it was the draw would have done neither team any favours. So Kelso, obviously get the win and continue at the top of the pile.
And it means effectively that Melrose are out of the equation. We're down to Ayr and Kelso. And interestingly enough, Kelso are at Mireside, which is a place that Ayr didn't enjoy going to. They won the match by 2 points, but they were down for a little while. And of course, they were playing against 14 men right at the start of the first half. Red card for Watsonians. Watsonians did well at Mireside, and they'll be looking to do the same because they're not out of the woods yet as far as relegation's concerned.
Yeah, there's still a lot of big games, obviously, with the kind of, I would say the reshuffle, but I think that's been quite polite in terms of the way that the leagues are going to be structured next year. But, there's still a lot of interesting games coming up for a lot of teams. So I do think the Watsonians game for Kelso a few weeks ago might have looked a little bit more daunting, but I think the performances have slightly dropped off from Watsonians. But that's not to say, like you've just mentioned there, like against a team who, are heavy favourites, that the gloves are off, because Neil Hinnigan mentioned it. They like to play a kind of similar brand to Melrose, and that is a brand of rugby that I feel can sometimes quite test Kelso because they've got that big, powerful pack. Sometimes if you do move them around a bit, it does take a little bit out their legs. So it's going to be an interesting contest, but one that you would imagine Kelso will get through, but they need to get through to make sure that they kind of keep the destiny in their own hands.
Ayr then will play Biggar at home in their last home game of the season before they travel to play Kelso Gala and then end with Stuart's Melville. Kelso after the weekend have got Ayr at home, then GHK and Highland away. Also in National 1, it's Melrose at home to Highland this weekend. Here's the thoughts of Melrose coach Bert Grigg.
So the first team welcome Highland down to the Greenyards on Saturday for El Plastico. The 2 teams that have got the 3G pitches in the league. Obviously coming off of that defeat against Kelso, which means that realistically we're out the running for the league. But look, as a group of players, coaches, management, we're still wanting to finish the league season on a high. We've got 4 games left in Highland, Gala, Stuart's Melville and Dundee, and we're certainly targeting wins in those games, and it's not just a case of down in tools in that. And that'll help best prep us for the sort of Border League final in the middle of there, and also the Scottish Cup. So still 6-15 games to go as a minimum, if not more, depending on that Scottish Cup result. So boys are still fighting the good fight, and wanting to make sure that we're prepped for these games at training. So a few changes this week. See a couple of changes in the pack. Angus Runciman misses out again this week due to injury, but Elliot Ruffin returns after having work on last week. So gives us a bit of mobility in that scrum, having Elliott back. In the back line, both wingers, unfortunately, Connor and Harry are both unavailable. So 2 new wingers coming in, and Robin Sharp and Hamish Weir makes his return after a bit of a lengthy injury layoff, and we're looking forward to having him back on the pitch and giving us a bit of X factor out on that wing. But look, we had a pretty tough game up at Highland back in November time. We're expecting much the same again this time. Obviously their away form's been a bit poor, but look, we know what they're going to bring. They're going to bring a bit of X factor with some of their players in their back line, and they're going to be pretty physical up front, especially their front five. So we've got to be prepped for what's coming, and get a 5-point win on Saturday come the end of the game.
So as he says, Highland will certainly be happy to play on a 3G pitch, but they're not great travellers.
No, they're not, and it's one of those ones as well that Highland have, their season's almost away, especially with the result against Gala. There's a little bit of a gap there. They're kind of floating about in the middle, so they're almost in that little transition phase. But you could almost say that about Melrose, but they're kind of getting the hit out before the Border League final now, so they've still got something to play for in terms of a prize to get some silverware on their top table at the end of season dinner. So it's an interesting game, but you would imagine that Melrose will be wanting to try and bounce back from their close and narrow defeat against Highland. And Struan Hutchison did mention a few weeks ago they've not been playing well, they've not been performing, but they've been picking up wins. You could almost say the same against Kelso. They played well in phases, didn't really get the continuity for out 80 minutes, and they came off second best on this occasion. So they'll be wanting a reaction. But David Colvin did mention that at the end of the Kelso game, that they've had a chat, they get back down, they start focusing on this Border League final, and try and get another one of them in the bag.
And of course Highland could still have a big part to play in who wins, because obviously if it does go to the last game of the season, which you think it probably will, it's Highland against Kelso, and Highland would certainly be up for that.
Yeah, and not to try and annoy the majority of the teams in National 1, I would say that you look at the fixtures that Kelso and Ayr have and the way that they've played this season, you could probably say that they're going to win all of those games, and you exclude the one Kelso versus Ayr at Poinder Park. So you would say whoever wins that game, if it's Kelso, they've got a really good cushion, and it might not go down in the last game. But if Ayr do get the win on that occasion, they'd be on the top of the league, or they potentially could be top of the league, and Kelso need to go to Highland on the last day of the season to get a win and hope the rest of the results go their way. So it is all coming down for me to that game at Poinder Park, but there are still a lot of tricky games in there. They've got difficult games. Even bigger at home this weekend for Ayr's a difficult game. But Highland as well, they've got to play Kelso, and they'll want nothing more than to beat Kelso up there and spoil their party. Teams love doing that. When a team is on the cusp of going into the Premiership or on the cusp of winning the league, it's just that added incentive for the opposition.
And as Bert said, not just the league games for them to go, but they've also got to prepare for the Border League final against Selkirk and that trip to Millennium Park to take on Curry in the Cup.
I think the Border League final is a big incentive for Melrose. I think it'll be a great game as well. Netherdale's a big pitch, and I think the two teams that are playing with Melrose and Selkirk, it gives you a National 1, a Prem team. It gives you a big pitch to try and they both like to play on, expansive rugby, but they've got the forwards that can mix it with each other. So I think it's almost like two styles of rugby which I think are quite replicated, Selkirk and Melrose. So they're aiming towards that, you would say, against Curry, depending on how the next couple of weeks go in terms of their celebrations. If they do manage to get into the final and win the Premiership, they might be eyeing up a double, they might be eyeing up a cup run. So that's a difficult game for Melrose to go into, because you would say there's a little bit of a gap in quality between the two sides now that Super 6 is there. But
certainly the Melrose Selkirk, it's a very attractive fixture, and it's an unlikely final, because on paper it would have been Hawick and Kelso in terms of who's at the top end of the league. Yeah, and I was thinking that earlier, never really alluded to it when we were building up for the Kelso game, but you think about that win at the Greenyards is the thing that's given Melrose their place in the Border League final. The difficult tie at the Gates, which was a great game in horrendous conditions as well. So they've had to work for those wins to get into the Border League final, and as have Selkirk, because that draw
against Hawick in the opening game of the season has pretty much been what's put them in the Border League final as well. So, that's an interesting game, and I've been really lucky over the last few years in terms of being involved in your stuff, Stuart, in helping commentate and cover games that I've become a Borders Rugby fan, like more than being affiliated to a team. And these games are the sort of games I love because I think they're two even teams. You would say Celtic probably marginal favourites, but there's little stories in there. Scott White against Melrose. You've got Head and Jackson who played for Melrose as well in there. You've got a lot of interesting little dynamics in that Border League final, which it's the oldest rugby union competition in the world. So those stories keep coming, and it's hopefully we get a big crowd at Gala.
Monday, the 20th of March for that one. We'll be coming live on that particular day. Surprising it's on a Monday, I suppose, but we'll take that.
Yeah, I think it just signals. I could actually go on for ages, so I'm going to try and keep it brief. But I think it does highlight the negligence from perhaps Scottish rugby and perhaps rugby spectators and clubs as well, as to the Border League's been a little bit of an afterthought. And when you get such a good final like that, and it's been kind of well managed this year, I think, in terms of there's not been a lot of fixture congestion, and we've got to the point where we actually have a Border League final, which is not going to impact anything else. I think the Monday night might be quite attractive, but we'll just have to wait and see. I hope they get a big crowd down there. It would be nice to see the stand at Netherdale packed, and hopefully it's a dry day, and we can be treated to a great rugby occasion.
And to be fair to the Border League as well, they did want it, I think, on the Friday night that Gala are now playing bigger on as well. So they looked at all the possibilities. I think there was a couple of Tuesdays and a Monday, and they've gone for the Monday. I think it'd be quite fun. I mean, there's not many games, I think, in the past 20 years that have been played on a Monday competitively.
Yeah, and it probably is more of a focus on the two clubs wanting to win silverware as opposed to making it a social occasion, because rugby is mostly a social occasion. So, Gala perhaps might miss out on a few beverages being sold over the bar, but, hopefully that, they can get a lot of youngsters down and try and inspire, and hopefully we can breathe a little bit of life back into the Border League, because as well, on top of that, it's a Monday night and it's getting covered on the radio. So it's going to be, getting some good coverage, and so the players on display are going to be, showcased and highlighted. So hopefully they can make a good occasion of it.
And full television highlights the next day as well, which is good, including the commentary. So that's a rarity that we haven't had for a wee while, but we'll definitely be doing it for that one. So plenty to look forward to then. Now, Andrew Fleming, of course, going back to what we said about 10 minutes ago, he'll be at the Green Yards for that game between Melrose and Highland. Also National 1, Gala are on the road at Bridgehall to face Stirling County, who are currently in a relegation position in third bottom. Now, a good win for Gala last weekend at home to bottom team Stuart's Melville, as you would expect, but I'd suggest that Stirling County will be really up for it. Just 3 games for them to play to escape relegation.
Yeah, and we've said in the weeks that have passed how difficult it like the Melrose and Ayr found to go to Bridgehall, and Kelso went up there and they put in a really good performance. So it's probably one that Stirling will fancy. Gala are again going through that kind of transitional period, and obviously we've not got Ewan or Craig to give us a little bit of an insight into the squad, but I think the squad selection will be interesting to see how they're going to fare up there. But that again comes back to how interesting these leagues have been this season. The Premiership is now at the business end, but there's still a lot of games to go in terms of the shuffle in the leagues.
Some good matches for Gala still to be involved with. That game against Melrose, of course, which we'll be covering, and also covering the Gala versus Ayr match, which will be our feature commentary game in a couple of weeks' time. And that could have huge significance on the league. But as I mentioned, the Stirling County side, they're in a bit of a struggle with Watsonians and GHK to see who stays up from that league. You would expect that Aberdeen and Stu Mel have a mountain to climb to escape the drop, although both have a potential 25 points to play for, and we've seen how Musselburgh performed the great escape in their last few games in the Premiership. So anything possible there.
Yeah, and it's 2 big clubs as well, like Stuart's Melville and Aberdeen Grammar. They're 2 clubs that have been up towards the kind of pearly heights for a while in terms of club rugby, but Aberdeen especially, to go kind of back-to-back relegations kind of shows does it show a lack of appetite in the kind of Caledonian region for rugby at the moment? Does it show a lack of backing? I don't know. sometimes it's, they get some really good uni students going up in the area, and it does kind of supplement what they've got in the area. But it's not been over the last couple of years, and there's some good players in the Grammar squad as well that have stuck about and tried to, Tom Applin being one. He's a good player. They've tried to try and stop the rot, if you will, but it looks like it's going to be Stuart Melville and Aberdeen going down this season and one another.
And we've seen so many big clubs, haven't we, go down and basically free fall it all the way out the leagues. Murrayfield Wanderers, for instance, now plying their trade in National 3. We've had Hillhead, Jordan Hill, Livingston in the past as well. All are now playing regional rugby.
West of Scotland. You've got a lot of big clubs that are, probably Falkirk, we were speaking about it off air last week, and, they threw a lot of cash at players. Clubs can't sustain that now, and have realised they need to try and nurture their local talent and be community clubs again. So, there's a lot of clubs have went, down and playing regional rugby, and the one that stands out to me at the moment is Boroughmuir. Boroughmuir, in terms of the Boroughmuir Bears, when they're born, they look like they're a mid-table Super 6 team that, on their day can put in a good performance, but, at their worst can get beat by, the likes of the Knights and the Wolves that didn't play too well last year. But, the Boroughmuir club team look like they're definitely going to be going down, and, it's a big ask to try and build that up again. And they even had 2 ex-Super 6 players playing on Saturday against Peebles. So, even the players that are coming in are just not able to stop that rot. And, they've got a kind of losing culture at the moment. And they're going to be another team that you can add to that list that we've just alluded to.
Well, interesting, you were mentioning Falkirk. I was in Inverness during the week and came back from the train, and on the left-hand side was the Falkirk rugby ground, and there it was proudly advertised, their game against Peebles. And Falkirk in second place at the moment. Peebles are in fourth. It's going to be an interesting match because Newton Stuart are top at the table at the moment, but only a couple of points in front. And of course, Falkirk have that game in hand. So it would be great to see Falkirk, who, as you said, went down, have now recruited using a lot of Falkirk players and are going back up in the right direction again. So that's going to be a cracker. Falkirk against Peebles. And here's head coach of Peebles talking about it, Ian Chisholm.
There's a lot for us to play for this weekend up at Falkirk. It's probably our most significant game of the season, where if we come away with a result, we give ourselves an opportunity depending on other results elsewhere, and it's a small chance, but at least it's a chance, and it gives us a wee bit of hope there. And but if we don't come away with a result, then look, we can focus on we can focus on performance and the style of play that we want to play, and look at a few things we're trying to implement next season and try them now without consequence, without fear. We obviously want to win all of our remaining games. And look, Falkirk are a good side, so like Stevie Leck is a good coach, and last time out when they came down to the Gates, we gave them a 21-point lead and we never really got going. And then come that second half, we started playing, and this was the match that Andrew Brown was banned in, and that was quite an important play that when the referee blew up as well. We went 21-0 down, I think it was, but we still gave ourselves an opportunity to win the game, and we probably should have won that game there. We go back to us, giving away 20+ penalties in too many games, and that was a game that we did that. There was a lot there where we were inaccurate, and look, it's one of the few games this season where our scrums actually went backwards. So look, we feel we're a better side now. We feel we've got a bit of momentum, and we're on a good run of games, and we're getting things right tactically. So we're excited going up this weekend, and we believe that we can get a result. And look, we do have some changes in the squad. So Rob Harrison, he is away to Turkey. I think he's getting his teeth fitted actually. So he goes for a straight swap with Jack Harrison, his brother, who just slots into 12 there. And Jack will probably give us a bit more width and distribute a bit more than his brother. But look, Rob's a really solid defender. He's a really solid attacker, and I really love him as a centre. But he is a back row. So we'll probably get a bit more width with Jack in there, and I drop out of the squad. So Buster Davidson comes into the starting spot with Robin Smith coming onto the bench. So look, the squad as it goes is Neil Hogarth, John Napier and Willie Aitken. Kenny Clyde and Jay Coltman make up the second rows. In the back row we've got Kami Pai at 6, Murdo Anderson returns to the squad at 7, and Finlay Collins at 8. Finlay Sinclair's he's still out. He took a concussion in that Glasgow Accies game, so he's still out for a wee while. He's still experiencing symptoms, so we're not gonna go near him for a little while. Caleb McKeever, he's been a warrior for us. He keeps his place at 9 with Donald Anderson at 10. On the wings, Neil Pate, Buster Davidson, with Scott Studdart moving to fullback, and in the centres, Jack Harrison and James Dow. Dowsey's been really solid for us this season, but he hasn't played an awful lot of centre, and I think we have found his position. I love how late he moves at the line. I love how clever a defender he is, and he's just an outstanding support player as well. He always seems to be in a position for an offload or a clear out or a lift off the ground. On the bench, John Gray and Lewis Copeland, they're a front row cover there. With Sean Brotherston dropping out the first team squad, so all three of them drop out the first team squad. With Robin Smith, who's played really well against Melrose, played really well against Glasgow Accies. He missed out last week, so he'll be looking to make an impact off the bench. We're really hopeful that we can keep a bit of excitement and keep a bit of momentum going for us. That we come away for Falkirk with 4 or 5 points.
As fluent as ever there, and he's dropped himself this week.
Yeah, after a hat-trick as well. He was the self-proclaimed...
Not good enough.
No, 4th best fullback at People's Rugby Club after Donald, Scott Stoddart and Jim Curry. So I think it was good to see him reshuffling. But I know players coming in there like Buster Davidson. I thought Scott Stoddart against Melrose a few weeks ago was really good. The way that he was, especially in the second half, he was coming in the line really, with a lot of pace and giving Melrose some trouble. But especially the dropout of Robert Harrison, not just the dropout from the squad, but the dropout of his front tooth as well, that he lost in the club rooms on Saturday night. So, that's just the trials and tribulations you get in National 2 rugby. But it's good. Again, you look at the way Ian Chisholm speaks about the People's squad, the way that they've got themselves, they hit a little bit of a rut midway through the season, and they've been able to kind of galvanise themselves again, and the rotation of that front row as well. Willie Aitken and Neil Hogarth coming back in at the starting lineup, and the likes of Copeland and Napier, they get a rest, and John Gray as well. They've all played well in the front row, so they've got a bit of strength and depth there now, and some good young players coming through. So the likes of McKeever and Collins and Sinclair have played well for Peebles this year. So it's a bit perhaps too ambitious to think that they can get promotion this year, but they can certainly have a big say in terms of who goes up and look to build for next year.
They do have this chance. This is probably their last chance saloon, isn't it, to get back in the mix again? I mean, you've got Newton Stewart, played 18, 67 points. They should be strong enough to beat Preston Lodge this weekend. Falkirk, though, I mean, if Peebles beat Falkirk and take points off them, all of a sudden Peebles could get 61 points, keeps Falkirk on 65. Glasgow Accies have a tough one. They're at home to Kirkcaldy. Kirkcaldy on their day with 2 games in hand could do the business as well. And, all of a sudden you've got Falkirk on 65, Glasgow Accies 63 and Peebles 61 with 4 games to go.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about those teams like Peebles, Kirkcaldy, PL, Lasswade, Boroughmuir, Hamilton, Falkirk. They're all huge teams, and it's an exciting league, and I think it's probably going to make the 10-team leagues that much more interesting, because I feel like there's not going to be too many weak games. There maybe be one or two, as there always is in amateur rugby, but you look there at the bottom of that league, the likes of Boroughmuir, Cartha and Hamilton have almost been guaranteed 5-pointers for most teams. So still a lot of rugby to play in that division, but I know you're wanting Falkirk to get the win and potentially get promotion, but I can't bet against Peebles.
Of course, we must mention Berwick as well, sitting in 5th place at the moment. And of course, between 5th and 9th, there's only 5 points separating them. But Berwick lost away last weekend, but are back at home where they do play well. Here's one of the Berwick coaches, Paul Pringle.
So this week we'll welcome Dumfries to Scremerston in what is a must-win game for us. They're right in the mix in the 5 that are vying for the survival, so we really need to get a home win, which is definitely achievable. We've seen what Dumfries are about earlier in the season. They are a good team, but we're really expecting to put on a bit of a show at Scremerston and get the points which we need just to move us a little bit closer to safety. Last week was a really disappointing week for us. Away to Kirkcaldy, we felt like we were very much in the game. It was just key mistakes at key moments in the game and just sometimes poor execution by us, so left very, very frustrated. There's also, I suppose, there was a few issues around the interpretation of the breakdown. They were probably just a little bit more streetwise than us. And on the back of that, just to compound the issue, we also had We lost Duncan Hardy at a breakdown to an ankle injury, and in all likelihood that's probably the end of Duncan's season. So on the back of that, we've been fortunate enough to bring back Ben Nicholson. He's moved up from the second, so he's actually coming in at full-back, and Rory Hindhoff is moving into centre just to shore things up there. Very fortunate that Nathan Melrose is back from holiday, so Nathan will move back into the front row. He offers us a wealth of experience, and he's a very strong ball carrier for us and a steady player around the park, so it's great to have him back. Ryan Wilson will move back into the back row where he's been so effective earlier in the season, which is great for him. We've also got Ekor moving up from the twos, who just adds a bit of strength and a bit of dominance around the park. So all in all, the pack are looking really strong this week, and we've got Carl Gullen, Stuart Farnaby and James Grieve all on the bench who can make big impacts when they come on. The backs therefore are largely unchanged apart from the Ben Nicholson move, which we talked about earlier. And really we're just going into the game, looking to put on a good performance, get the points in the bag. That's what it's all about at this stage of the season. The lads have worked extremely hard in training on Tuesday night. Colin's really put them through their paces, so we would expect to see the outcome of that on Saturday. It's also ex-Players Day at the Berwick Rugby Club, so if the lads need any more encouragement, there's 120 ex-players who surely give them a little bit of advice and a spur on to get the result. But yeah, Saturday can't come quick enough for us, and hopefully we get the right result.
Well, Berwick picked up a point on the road last week, but this is huge for them. Yeah,
it's a big game. You can start to see, the teams that are in that kind of trapdoor, the 5 teams at the bottom. You would say that there's 3 away. There's still 2 places that are up for grabs. You look at Kirkcaldy, with that win that they got, in terms of that victory, did close the gap. So they've got themselves in a good position, Kirkcaldy. So you would imagine that the likes of, Berwick, PL, Last Wade and Dumfries will certainly be, in a precarious position going towards the end of the season. So this is a big game, but it's great to hear that there's so many ex-players going to be there at Scremerston to give that additional support, that additional encouragement, and hopefully nobody at the end of the game is saying, I could do a better job than you. And so, that's it tends to be the way of ex-players. I can still say that as well, but it's a lie most of the time. But, it'll be a good occasion for Berwick, and it's important that they get that win.
Absolutely. Now, East 1 sees Duns at home to Leith. No local games in East 2, but 2 matches in East League 3. Earlston are at home to Edinburgh University Medics, who drew at home with Galway IM last week. Here's captain of Earlston, Aaron Patterson.
Leading up to Edinburgh Uni Medics this weekend, obviously we had Edinburgh Northern 2 weeks ago. There was a lot of positives to take for that. Our attitude was on point. We were all playing with a smile on our face, and it was an enjoyable game to be a part of, and that's what we're looking to do this weekend again. We know what Edinburgh Uni Medics can be like. They love to run the ball, love to keep it alive. They'll keep running it for 80 minutes, and we're looking to shut that down and really drag them into our game rather than playing theirs. But as I say, the positives that we take, we're going to make sure we continue and consolidate on that, and we're looking for a more positive result score-wise this week. I know that the lads will be up for this one, second last game and last home game. So we're really looking to go after this. But at the end of the day, we'll just have to go there, play with a smile on our faces and see what happens, and we'll move on from there.
Well, their only win this season was void, in fact, against the disgraced Liberton club, who have since withdrawn from the league. But they're definitely not downbeat, and always plenty of positivity at the club. Yeah, you can hear there, though, obviously they're speaking about playing with a smile on their face and looking to try and take some positives from each game, which is hard when you have a disjointed season. There is a culture and a kind of sporting culture to try and look for the positives in everything, even when it's such a negative result or you've had a couple of bad results go your way. But at the end of the day, they're wanting to go out there, they want to end their home season on a high and put in a performance, and they're certainly looking like they're wanting to take some positives. And against the Medics, it's a good opportunity for Earlston to try and certainly end their home form in a bit of a crescendo. Also in East 3, Galway IM take on Trinity Accies at the Netherdale back pitches. Player coach Stuart Walker.
I think it's fair to say that everyone at Galway IM feels that there's a bit of momentum building over the last few weeks. We've been really pleased with the way that we've put some performances together, and that draw on Saturday, which we could have won, but we were pleased with that draw against the Medics away. So Trinity this weekend, we went up to Trinity before Christmas with a really depleted squad, and ended up finishing the game with 12 players. It was, to be honest, a low point in the season for us. However, we've recuperated since then. We feel that this weekend's an opportunity to put that right again, and to really give it a go and see if we can turn them over. The squad wise, we've got the same boys that we had at the weekend, plus a few coming back in again, so we'll have a bench, which we didn't have on Saturday. The aim of the weekend is to continue to build on the performances that we've put together, and to really give it a good go and put in a significantly better result than we did against Trinity away up there. They'll be up for it. They'll be confident based on the last game. Despite the fact that we were low in numbers, they were significantly ahead of us, and we want to, like I say, put that right, and hopefully put in a much better display and continue the progress that we've made.
Definitely an improved side as the season has progressed, and not many teams can get close to the Medics at Peffermill, which they did last week with a couple of good points.
Yeah, definitely. And you can hear Stuart when he's speaking there in terms of the way that their seasons went. And I remember sitting and speaking in the club rooms last season when they had such a they had a depth in their squad. They had a real good nucleus of players round about the squad, and all of a sudden, after we were there, they all started dropping like flies. They all started getting injured, which I think especially in that level is difficult, because you do sometimes rely on a lot of players who've got other commitments. Maybe they can't make training, so you do tend to get some more injuries. So in terms of going up last time when they played Trinity away, to finish with 12 players, it's a difficult thing to try and bounce back from, but they've had some good results, being able to, be competitive against the likes of the Medics as well, and a few weeks ago getting that win against Errolston. So they're the sort of things that you look to try and build on to get your campaign going again. But they've got some games to finish the season, and then they'll be looking towards trying to retain some of those players and make sure that they can build and launch back into next year's campaign.
Kelso ladies couldn't raise a side last weekend, unfortunately, but hopefully they'll get a few injured bodies back for their home tie on Sunday. It's in the National League, and it's against Aberdeenshire. But that's it for today. We're here tomorrow at 2 o'clock for Borders Rugby Special. Hawick against Mars, our featured commentary in the Premiership semi-final playoff. Hope you can join us for all that, plus the score updates as they happen. And to tune in, all you have to do is go to the homepage at bordersrugby.net, press the Listen Live button. It's as simple as that. Thanks for listening tonight from Dale and I. Bye-bye.